Christmas, New Year's. It was a celebration of Darren. And then getting to the NFL, it's something that I will never forget. And then that's when it happened. We was kind of like sitting ducks.
A member of the Denver Broncos was killed last night in a drive-by shooting.
My hip is hurt. I think I'm hit. Just pandemonium. Everybody just was screaming, D.
We didn't know who fired the gun, where it came from, or why it happened. It did not feel random. We knew that Darren Williams was dead, and we did not know why.
On Friday night, the atmosphere at the stadium, the band, the pep rally, Letterman jackets, all of that was excitement. It was nothing for 8,000 people to be at a game. It's Texas, it's football. It was a big deal. We went 7 years without losing a football game in this town. And Darren was one of the top 5 football players I've ever coached in my life.
He gave us great moments each and every Friday night.
From Little League to NFL, everybody in the city knew who Darren was.
Super athlete. He had the heart of a lion. And he always had that dog in him.
Darren Williams, he was our friend. I met him at 14 and seen him through high school. He was a star. He was somebody special. Darren was playing for the Denver Broncos. So we went to Denver for New Year's.
It was my first time flying. I was nervous on the flight. I'm coming from Texas, we didn't know exactly what type of clothes to bring. When we got off the plane and we saw how high the snow was, it was kind of like, whoa.
The snow was just, it was a lot of snow. I've never seen that much snow in my life. I just remember pulling up in a limousine to this club, and once we was going in, we met like at least 2 or 3 of his teammates. Brandon Marshall, Javon Walker, shook everybody's hand. You know, seeing people on TV and meet them in person, you know, it was cool. It was cool. But for us, D was the biggest star. We Denver Broncos, Darren Williams fan. Being from a small town and witnessing D go from being a regular guy to just can pretty much buy whatever you want, go wherever you want. It's a dream come true.
With Darren being from Texas, you know, he wanted to show us that hospitality. He brought 5 of us up there. He trying to show us a good time.
We head upstairs to the VIP area. We just enjoying the moment. Champagne and the ladies. A lot of people kind of like said they were looking at us because we was dressed way different from everybody in the party. D had us some custom graffiti shirts that was real popular. It was different, and we definitely stood out. Where y'all from? Where y'all from? We're from Texas. It was it, you know, we was it. We was the life of the party at that point.
We were at the club all the way to about 2 o'clock. When we came out, we was at the tail end of everything.
We got in the limo, and at that time, we were pulling off, drove off a block, made a right. A little bit after we made that right, that's when we just heard all the gunshots. The limo pulled over real hard. My side was burning. I'm like, man, I think I'm hit. Once the lights came on in the limo and everybody can actually see what's going on inside, And that's when just pandemonium started happening. And everybody just was screaming. The ladies that was in there just screaming to the top of their lungs. Oh, D, 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 D.
Darren, he wanted to play football his whole life. I've been knowing him since I was a baby, a toddler. Racing, he was like the fastest one on the street, so everybody wanted to race him. We mostly played sports in the neighborhood. Carter Park, well, that's where it all started. It was pretty tough.
We grew up, you know, how young men grow up in the inner city. Well, we made it because of sports. He was always D. Will. He was always Darren, right? Darren Williams. If D didn't have the passion, we wouldn't be who we were, right? And then you need that spark, and he was the spark.
Like a human joystick, like he touched the ball. He finna run over there, run back over here. He finna run everywhere and make a big play.
He had talent most people don't have. Physically, not the biggest, not the strongest, but the most determined. It was the heart, and it was the put it on the line and win type of mentality that separated him from other guys who might have had the same talent.
He was an amazing, simply amazing football player. He would do things that was just unreal. Whatever he did, whatever he touched, turned to gold.
I was in college, Oklahoma State. Darren was up and coming, and a lot of coaches were raving about him. When he came on a visit, that's when I first got to meet him. We clicked from the get-go. So when I went to the Broncos, I remember walking out on the practice field. The defensive back coach pulled me to the side. He was like, man, what'd you think about the boy Darren Williams? You know, we thinking about drafting him. And I'm like, oh, man, y'all get him to put him on side of champ. It's going to be the best tandem. No, that's all I remember telling them.
We were watching the NFL draft. The first round goes through, and the Denver Broncos, with their pick, they select Darren Williams, Oklahoma State. I lost it. I just ran around the room.
I remember us all being at Grandma's house in Carter Park. As soon as they mentioned his name, it was like the perfect timing. We could walk outside and he was coming around the corner and he was so excited. He had a bottle of champagne.
Everybody ran outside. We were all live and hugging him. It was a great feeling. We were very excited and happy for Darren.
He bought Grandma a car. He bought his mom a house. He made sure he gave back to who took care of him and who was there for him.
He was never like, okay, I'm bigger than this now. I've moved on. He never forgot Carter Park. He was just a brilliant young man.
Denver Broncos right cornerback Darren Williams was shot and killed this morning after leaving a nightclub in Denver in a limousine. Police called it a drive-by shooting. A spokesman described the team as in complete shock. Darren Williams was 24.
Just after 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from my sergeant, and he informs me that we just had a homicide and that our victim was Darren Williams. And I was like, the Bronco player? And he goes, yeah, Darren Williams with the Denver Broncos.
In 2007, I was a detective in homicide. New Year's Eve is a busy night for police, a lot of parties and alcohol, which can lead to violent crimes. You're gonna go to bed early New Year's Eve knowing that you're gonna get called. And when you have a case of this magnitude, the fact that it's high profile, we're gonna throw as many resources as we can on this, which is why so many of us got called out right away.
The limousine is found at 11th and Spear, which is probably about 3 or 4 blocks down from the club. When the officers arrived at the scene, rap music was still playing inside the white limo. We do know that there was a minimum of 15 rounds fired it. One of the windows of the limousine was shot out, so we could have had more than 15. There were shell casings found at the scene, but we also found 40 caliber bullets inside the limo. Darren Williams was struck in the neck by a 40 caliber bullet. We had 3 victims. Darren Williams was sitting in the back of the white limo. You had a female victim that got a graze on the top of her head. And then you had Brandon Flowers. I believe that he was shot in the thigh.
I remember finally got to the hospital. They was kind of investigating at that point. You know, my name is Brandon. The guys came in and was like, hey, is you Brandon Marshall? I'm like, nah, I'm Brandon Flowers. Are you sure you ain't Brandon? And I'm like, man, Brandon Marshall, he an NFL player, he rich. Nah, I ain't Brandon Marshall. And they was questioning me about what happened. Asking questions like, did the shots come from inside? I'm like, wow, inside. They was trying to seem like we may have been suspects.
It did not feel random. There certainly was some driving factor that culminated in this big act of violence. It could be some revenge thing, a love triangle, a fight. Was it Bronco against Bronco? We just didn't know.
O.D. White High School is kind of like the place you wanted to be if you want to try to go on to college and then have a shot at the NFL. I've been trenched here because my father was the head coach, then I was the head coach, and my brother now is currently the head coach. I coached Darren before he went to college. When he went on the NFL, I would call Darren and talk to him all the time. The Denver Broncos, they need to win the game to get to the playoffs, but they don't win. So I text Darren, Happy New Year's. 1 o'clock, I don't get a text. And so I tell my wife, I said, that's strange, that's unusual. Dee didn't text me back. She said, boy, Dee ain't thinking about you. It's New Year's Eve. So I go to bed, but I don't go to bed feeling good. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I get up, and as soon as I turn the TV on, it's this picture. I said, oh, Dee's on TV. So then the year that he was born comes up, and then the year 2007 came up. And it shook me.
It was like 3 or 4 in the morning. We first got the news. Everybody in the house is crying. Not D. Will, you know, he had the up-and-coming future. And his life got taken from him like that. It was just sad, man. It was rough.
I was just so hurt. I really couldn't believe it. I was angry. I was confused. I just thought of so many other ways it could have happened, like, why'd it have to be him?
Police are still looking for suspects and answers in the shooting death of Denver Broncos cornerback Darren Williams. He was killed when his stretch Hummer was sprayed with bullets in a drive-by shooting in Denver.
Once everything on the scene is contained, you have the time to start examining things. You can tell by the strikes, we call them defects, on the white limo. You can look at them and determine if it's an entry or an exit.
We were able to determine that all of the gunfire appeared to be coming from the outside to the inside. So Darren Williams' friends, he had several friends who were visiting. We were able to rule them out as suspects. One of the first things we do after a homicide is to try to locate any cameras that might have shown anything. And what we got was a video that did show part of the front of the club, but it's not very good video. 15 years ago, video was not nearly as good as it is now.
It was very grainy. You could not make out faces, but you could see Darren Williams and his 5 friends walk to a white limousine that was double parked out in the street. All you could see was pretty much from the waist down. They're not seen getting into the limousine at this particular time. They're on the passenger side of the white limo, just standing around, yucking it up, it appeared. You then see that there is some type of exchange of words and an altercation taking place. There was a snowbank pretty close to the limo. You see people reaching over and falling into the snowbank. It was kind of hard to tell, but you could just see bodies mingling and falling down and stuff. And then it's a short time later, the white limo leaves. There were a couple witnesses on the street who had described the suspect vehicle as a white SUV. The driver of the limousine also described it as a white SUV, and some of them even said it was a Tahoe. The Denver Police Department tells the news that the department is looking for a white Chevy Tahoe. It is then the very next morning, a white Chevy Tahoe was found in the vicinity of Himalaya and 38th, maybe 10 minutes from the crime scene. It is spray painted black, and I'm not saying that it was totally painted black. It was a very bad paint job. Spray was on the windows, on the bumper. The top was never painted, it was left white. I mean, you could tell it was a white SUV, but the license plates are left on it. A .40 caliber gun barrel was found in the vicinity where the white Chevy Tahoe was abandoned.
We had shell casings from the scene. We had actual bullet fragments. We can now test against the barrel of a gun.
Denver has a state-of-the-art crime lab. It's one of the top crime labs in the country. They test every shell casing and every bullet that is found in Denver, and they put it into the national database to see if it matches any unsolved crimes. It's the barrel that leaves the marking in the lead bullet as it goes through the barrel. So it's the barrel causes the lead to spin so a bullet can hit its target. It's like when you throw a pass. If the pass has a good spiral, it goes where it's supposed to go. If the pass is wobbly, it doesn't hit its target. That's what the ballistics part of it was. So to have the barrel was really important because then you can possibly tie that barrel back to some of the bullets that were recovered in the car from the people that were shot.
We know that was the actual murder weapon because the ballistic testing on the barrel showed that the bullet in Darren Williams' neck came from that barrel. The gun barrel was submitted for latent prints. No prints on it. But the white Chevy Tahoe, because the license plates were left on it, that links the vehicle to a person by the name of Brian Hicks.
Brian Hicks was a major drug dealer. He was part of the Trey Crips. They were responsible for moving so much narcotics, primarily cocaine, in the Denver metropolitan area that they were making about $1 million a month just on their drug dealing alone. And Hicks was kind of the enforcer. Hicks was working his way up with the OG guys, the old gangsters, and if he didn't like the way things were going, he had people killed. The problem is, Brian Hicks, at the time that Darren Williams was shot and killed, was in the Denver County Jail. Obviously, then, you start to look at Hicks's associates, and he's associated with some pretty serious gang members and very serious drug dealers.
Darren Williams, safe to say, he didn't want nothing to do with gangs. That was the last thing he was worried about. No room for that. You can't even have friends around you that want to be in that kind of crowd. You can't even have those guys next to you. You learn that early growing up through high school and in college. Hey, watch who you're around. So, nah, that was never an issue with D.
We grew up in a time when gangs were prevalent. Each one of us, being young men, had opportunities to, participate or not. But the gang to him meant nothing. Especially the position he was in. I'm an NFL player. I'm at the pinnacle.
But in Denver, the high-end gangsters and the professional athletes wind up meeting and interacting in the clubs, because a lot of times the gangsters will launder the money through business fronts of rap stars or rap musicians and or entertainment venues.
In Denver, when it comes to this kind of music, when it comes to the gathering places, they're limited. And so if you have young professional athletes like Darren Williams that wants to go out and have a good time and listen to the type of music he likes to listen to, it's going to be in a place where you may rub elbows with individuals that are gang members. They were brought together by their lifestyles, by what they like, by the fact that there was going to be a lot of celebrity-type people that were going to be at this party.
We had no idea why the Trey Crips would want Darren Williams dead.
I remember distinctly asking, was Darren Williams actually the target of this whole thing, or maybe someone else was the intended target? Maybe another individual at the club that night.
This being our first time going out of town as a group, we didn't expect to have any type of confrontation with anyone, especially with D being there. And then everything happened so fast. It was like we weren't able to prepare for anything. Like you couldn't brace yourself for anything. We was kind of like sitting ducks.
Inside the limo was Darren Williams, Javon Walker, and there were the 5 friends of Darren's from Fort Worth. And then there was some females who they had just met. And then there were just people standing outside of the limo. The witnesses at the crime scene were brought down by officers to headquarters. We divide them up, make sure that they aren't talking to each other. His friends from Fort Worth, it was easier for us just to call them the Fort Worth 5. We asked, was there anything inside the club that could have started this?
The common thread was that there were a few different incidents that occurred at the club that night, all of them relatively minor, that you wouldn't think would lead up to something as big as this.
At the club, everything was, we was in a good space. We're having fun amongst the people that we're with. It was all about us. We didn't have no reason to engage with any other person or nothing.
Giving all praise to God, Williams family, greetings and prayers.
When Tatum Bell spoke, he was up there, he was trying to speak and finish, and he just broke down.
They say it's not how you come into the world, it's how you leave. And I was so hurt looking out there and seeing the kids, the family looking at me. I almost had a breakdown. Family, friends, I'm sorry. That's all I got to say. You just so many emotions going through your head, and we all had families, and it was just crazy, man. It was just tough.
His murderer didn't just kill him. You killed our relationship, our bond, our family. He altered that for the rest of our lives. His children would never have their father.
But I remember looking in the casket and I was like, that's not him. I still didn't believe it. I'm like, nah, it's not real.
We spoke with Brandon Marshall, who is also a member of the Denver Broncos. He was also at the club that night. And he admits that when he and his cousin got to the club, they were going into the club. Two guys confronted him and said they weren't very happy with Brandon Marshall apparently going to the front of the line.
These two people who were frustrated by the Denver Broncos cutting to the front of the line, they said, hey, we got money too. And I think what they're trying to say is, you're not so special. Brandon Marshall, in what I think was intended to be funny, replied back to them that if you got money, great, you can buy the drinks when we get inside. I don't believe that anybody in Darrent Williams' party, including Darrent Williams, knew that there had been this altercation. But Darrent's friends from Fort Worth, they all talked about how later in the night, at midnight, there had been a different altercation involving Brandon Marshall.
Darren's teammates, Brandon Marshall was popping about. It was him and his cousin.
When midnight hit, they just started going crazy with the champagne, just splashing it everywhere on everybody.
The champagne ended up spraying on a couple guys in another group. And it was the two guys that Brandon Marshall had this little exchange of words with as he was walking into the club. These guys felt disrespected, and they confronted the Denver Broncos players, and an argument ensued.
The other guys came up, hey, who's them over there splashing champagne everywhere? One of the dudes, he had ponytail hanging, and he was real upset. And the other dude, he was short, dark-skinned. He wasn't really saying too much. He was just kind of behind.
Darrent's friends did tell us that Darrent tried to smooth things over with these people at midnight.
He was playing the role of peacemaker.
He was like, hey, that's my people, man. Hey, everybody, we good, you know? No problem. They were like, who is you? He was like, yeah, I'm number 27 for the Broncos. He was like, oh, okay.
The group with the two other guys were asked to leave the VIP section.
About 2 o'clock. And when I came out the building, I thought the guys were gone. You know, we spotted them there on the corner.
And one of the dudes wanted to start trouble. We was like, is that the old boy that was upstairs? He came around and kind of approached us. He said some words to us, trying to draw us into the street with him or whatnot. And we just ignored him. But then, those guys getting into it with Brandon Marshall. D was kind of trying to break him up, and he pushed D hands down, like, nah, don't touch me. And Brandon Marshall like, hold on, that's D Will right there, chill out. And he like, I don't care who it is, but he don't even touch me.
And after that, Dan was like, hey, y'all with me, let's go. Because the person you trying to calm down is, now you can't be calmed down. Then at that time, hey, we all got in the limo. It was like, they was waiting for us to pull off. It wasn't even 3 minutes. We pulled off and hung a right, and then that's when it happened.
Looking at the video surveillance, we see these two individuals. One of them knocks down a female. They appeared to be leaving in a haste. We had no idea where they went, but when we looked at the video in the alley behind the Safari Club, we then see those same two individuals. The time's a little bit after. You see them going northbound now, and we believe that's when they went to a vehicle, because up north was a parking lot.
There was something different about what they were doing than everybody else. They were clearly people we needed to identify. Was there some link between them, Brian Hicks, and the Trey Crips? But we still, at this point, had no idea why what looked like a relatively small scuffle involving Brandon Marshall would lead to the murder of Darrent Williams.
There were a lot of people that were calling in tips thinking they may know something that would help solve this case. This was a very popular Denver Bronco.
We received all these leads because Darren Williams was very well liked in the community. Everybody knew who he was. I think they were all seeking justice.
One of the tips was the call from an anonymous woman, and that woman indicated that she saw an individual named Little Willie Clark in the white Tahoe.
Willie Clark has a lengthy criminal history and was well known to law enforcement. Certainly, he was a person of interest.
He was brought up to the homicide unit. I attempted to talk with him.
Willie, don't say anything yet. Let me, you probably know why you're down here. Okay, and if maybe not, but listen here, we want to talk to you about a few things. I'm Detective Mike Martinez with the Denver Police Department. Do you wish to voluntarily talk to us?
Where's my lawyer at?
So you don't want to talk to us?
He clearly wasn't going to do an interview and didn't want to give information.
You have the right to remain silent.
Little Willie had a parole violation, and so we arrested him for that parole violation so that we could at least get him into custody.
Willie, did you understand each of those rights I read to you?
Yes.
Willie was basically a lieutenant in the gang structure that Hicks had set up around the Trey Crips. It was a homegrown Denver gang. They were vicious. They committed a lot of crimes. They kept our gang unit very busy. As a member of the Metro Gang Task Force, I always thought the gang had the knowledge we needed to solve Darren Williams' murder. But the code of silence was preventing the people that knew about this from coming forward and giving us that information. If you spoke, you would get hurt. Well, Bob Fuller was recognized as one of the top gang investigators in the metropolitan area. This is a guy who never got tired, he never quit.
We utilize wiretap surveillances. We have multiple agents listening live on wiretaps. The calls are monitored, logged. It's a lot of hard work. It was 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day. We were able to connect Little Willie to Hicks because of prison phone calls.
Hicks was concerned about the shooting of Darren Williams.
Yeah, cuz we good, cuz. Cuz, trust me, cuz. That was like a blindside hit, cuz.
So they just smashed off afterwards, huh?
Yeah.
Willie Clark's comments that it was a blindside hit, that was code for nobody saw it coming, and don't worry about it, boss, because we ambushed them. I know Hicks was upset with Willie because, one, the car was tied back to him, he didn't get the plates off. The entire gang, the entire business was at risk based on what Willie had done.
During the investigation of the wiretaps, we were able to connect Little Willie to an individual named Daniel Harris. Daniel Harris was involved in a large-scale drug distribution with the Hicks organization through the Mexican cartel and also the New York Mafia.
So the two prominent names that we're now looking at as the suspects in the Darren Williams murder are Willie Clark and Ponytail, what we call him Ponytail, that's his nickname, but Daniel Harris.
We put together a photo array, went to Denver International Airport, met with the 5 friends of Darren's from Fort Worth, showed them these photo arrays.
Martinez comes up, he's a good guy. He wanted to get everything solved. He showed us some mug shots, you know, and at that time, you know, I still see, you know, those guys' face.
They identified Harris and Little Willie as the 2 individuals from the group that got into the verbal altercation inside the club and also the physical altercation outside the club.
I'm like, that's them? Please hurry up and go get them, if that's who done it.
We still don't know who was driving, who was shooting, who played what role. We just know that there's two people we really need to find. We know where one of them is because Willie's in jail. The second one, Ponytail, we were doing everything we could do to try to find him. One of the other people with them was later identified as a minor, and he was giving us information that as soon as this shooting had occurred, Harris got out of the car and fled. He fled all the way to Mexico. So we had little Willie not talking to us. Daniel Harris was out of the country.
It got to a point where we recovered the Tahoe, looked for fingerprints, looked for DNA evidence. All of those things were either coming back zero or they weren't helping the investigation. And a big part of the reason it wasn't advancing was the code of silence. These guys all come up in a brotherhood. They have their secret handshakes or whatever it is these gang members do. But when you put the pressure on them, when they're looking at life away from their families, they have a tendency to talk. And that code of silence falls apart. And they will give up their mother if it will keep them from going to prison.
We know that the murder of Darren Williams involved Willie Clark and Daniel Harris. Willie Clark was in jail. Harris went to Mexico. But in June of 2007, Daniel Harris returned to the United States. He did not know that there was a federal arrest warrant for him for the drug conspiracy from the wiretap situation.
Something happened down there that brought him back. And when he got back to Denver, he got arrested. He was looking at a very lengthy sentence in the federal penitentiary. And because of that, he had a conversation with Bob Fuller and basically told us what happened the night of the shooting of Darren Williams. But he didn't do it out of the kindness of his heart. He did it for his own benefit. He did not want to spend the rest of his life in the penitentiary.
Harris described the incident up in the VIP section, and he gave us information on what happened in the white Tahoe leading up to the shooting. After the shooting, he gave us volumes. Harris chose the path of a lesser sentence on breaking the code of silence and testifying against Hicks, Little Willie, to save himself a life in prison.
When we put the pressure on him, he told us what he did. And it was very clear then to us what Willie Clark was responsible for in the killing of Darren Williams.
Daniel Harris watched Willie Clark shoot into the limousine, striking 3 people and killing Darren Williams.
We then interviewed another person. He said that he had several conversations with Little Willie. Little Willie said that he was the one who shot and killed Darren Williams. He got rid of the gun by dismantling it, and they talked about painting Brian Hicks's white SUV. And we got what we needed. In the end, it was just plain stupidity. Little Willie lost his temper. He just felt he was disrespected, wanted to show that he's a big man, and the way he shows he's a big man is by taking care of matters with a gun. But he couldn't see anyone inside the limo. The limo had dark tinted windows. There is information that the target was Brandon Marshall. After the little altercation that they had, Little Willie believed Brandon Marshall got in the white limo with Darren Williams. Where the altercation takes place, you see 2 people coming out from that altercation. One who's later identified as Little Willie.
The other is identified as a minor.
They go south, then we pick up the video in the rear, and the time frame fits. After a few seconds, you see the same two individuals now running northbound in the alley. Brandon Marshall left in a different vehicle. And it seems he left at the time Little Willie is seen running up the alley. So they don't see him get into another limo.
I know that this had an impact on Brandon Marshall to the point that he was in tears on the stand when he was expressing that part of what happened here was his fault. It was his fault because he got into this altercation, and this altercation may very well have led to what happened to Darren Williams.
But please tell your name to the members of the jury.
Brandon Marshall.
All right, let's talk about when you stepped outside of the club. What did you see?
As I began to walk to the limo, I see guys across the snowbank on the sidewalk throwing up signs or whatever. And it was the same guys, and my first words were like, God damn, man. And there was a lot of cursing, a lot of words being exchanged. And when it really started getting out of hand is when the guy with the black glasses on, he kind of like lifted up his shirt like he had a gun, kind of got angry at the time and probably escalated the situation.
Little Willie, he was found guilty after a 2-week trial, and he was sentenced to life without parole for the murder of Darren Williams, and he was sentenced to an additional 1,142 years for attempt murder on the 16 people in the limousine. It's the longest sentence I've witnessed in my career.
It wasn't a win, we can't get D back with the verdict. I definitely felt like justice was served, but it was definitely a loss. You took so much away from everybody, the cousins, somebody's father. You took a lot.
On that night, he's doing everything right. Hey, let's go, it's time to go, y'all, let's go. He's been that leader, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if that leadership skill wasn't in there, well, maybe he'll still be alive. But that's who he was.
The city's been dark since he's left. It will never be the same, without D and Carter Park. He was an amazing guy and had amazing aspirations, and that spilled on anyone, any team, any person he was around. You felt like you was a superhero.
He was one of the greats. Like, you don't get too many greats. You get some goods, but you don't get greats. He was one of the greats.
He definitely was the glue of the family, the neighborhood. He was just that person, He was the magnet, we all.
Everyone who knew D had a deep, infinite love for him.
He just wasn't an NFL player, he was much more. And I still to this day feel like we need him.